Good afternoon also from my side, and thank you very much for joining this webinar, which is, the objective of this webinar is to provide you some information about the rulemaking task that is currently in progress in the agency concerning the establishment of a regulatory framework for the, let's say, acceptance, either through certificate or declaration of safety-related aerodrome equipment. And in the presentation, we first look into the regulatory requirements, which are contained in Regulation EU 2018-1139, is the so-called as a basic regulation, which actually says what we need to do. Then we will have a look on the essential requirements, which are described in the annex of this regulation, followed by some examples of aerodrome equipment, which we consider that will fall under the scope of the future regulatory framework. Then we will have a very generic overview of the regulatory framework, how the rules will look in the future, and what will be the connection between the current regulation, the future regulation, the certification specifications, the AMC, and the guidance material. Then we will describe a little bit on the process that the aerodrome operator has to follow, and the manufacturer, what are the responsibilities, and how this will be discharged in a very, very generic way. Followed by the technical specifications. We are not going to refer to specifics for equipment, but we are going to tell you from where and how we are going to develop these technical specifications. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll have a couple of slides about the expected benefits as we show them. And last but not least, the timelines. So when we are going to the different milestones of the tasks, and when we envisage the regulation to be in place. So starting from the basic regulation, the first one is the definition. What is called safety-related aerodrome equipment? And you see in the regulation that includes a lot of things, but the most important is that we refer to equipment which is used or intended to be used to contribute to the safe operation of aircraft at an aerodrome. And we need to be very careful with this definition, because the intention is not to include everything that is, let's say, of the air side of an airport into this regulation, but only those things which are important for the safe operation of the aircraft at the aerodrome. Then we have a mandate, and of course we need to, the basic regulation describes how we will set up the system. And the first thing that you see, and it's very, very important, that the certificate, as we know, in Europe, certain aerodromes are subject to certification under the EU law. And a certificate is required for these aerodromes. And the certificate, in many cases, it covers the aerodrome and its safety-related equipment. The new thing that came with the revision of the EASA basic regulation is that it gives the option to certify or declare the safety-related aerodrome equipment. So we are talking of a different regime which will complete in a different way the existing provisions, and it will be made clear to you later on. So the basic regulation also says that the organizations which are manufacturing, design, manufacture, and produce safety-related aerodrome equipment, they can either declare the equipment that the equipment meets the detailed specifications established by the agency, or hold a certificate. And these are the two ways on how we approve and we recognize the safety-related aerodrome equipment. So we have the option of the declaration or the option of the certificate. So also the basic regulation describes how the certificate will be issued. The certificate, of course, in order to get a certificate, the applicant has to demonstrate that the equipment complies with the detailed specifications. It's similar to, for those who have been involved in the certification of the aerodrome, where the aerodrome operator needs to demonstrate that the aerodrome, the physical characteristics, the visual aids, and everything that is part of the CB complies with these specifications. The same process applies for the applicants of safety, or for a certificate for safety-related aerodrome equipment. And of course, the certificate, when it's issued, it will specify the functionalities of the equipment. And of course, as any other certificates, when there are changes in the functionalities of the system, of course, there is the option to amend the certificate. And also, the regulator has provisions for the limitations, suspension, or revocation of an equipment certificate if the equipment does not comply with the rules and procedures based on which the certificate has been issued or does not meet the requirements of the certification specification. And the next article, it gives the authorization to the agency to develop all these regulations for the development of the detailed specifications, also to write the rules and the procedures for issuing, amending, maintaining, limiting, suspending, or revoking the certificates. And of course, we need also to write down when the certificates are required. The same applies for the declaration. So we need to establish the procedures for the declaration. And at the end, we need to also to specify which are the privileges and responsibilities of the holders of the certificate or the organizations that they are making the declaration. So you see here what are the authorizations of the agency and the things that we need to include into the regulation. Now, the big question is, not the big question, is something which is new, and especially for the aerodrome domain, it's quite new, because for the aerodromes, the competent authority responsible for the certification of the aerodrome is always the competent authority of the state where the aerodrome is located. For the safety-related aerodrome equipment, there is something new. The competent authority is the agency, in EASA. meaning that the agency is responsible to certify, to oversee, and take enforcement measures for certificate holders or organizations that they have submitted declarations for safety-related aerodrome equipment. We are also responsible to notify the applicable of the detailed specifications, either for certification or for declaration, and of course, to prepare all the technical specifications. So this is something which is different from what let's say, the aerodromes and the states were used up to now. Then we have the essential requirements, which describe which are the, let's say, the basic principles that a safety-related aerodrome equipment, where includes also visual and non-visual aids, needs to meet. And you see that they are very, very generic. For example, they say that the safety-related aerodrome equipment shall function as intended under the foreseen operating conditions. And then whenever we develop the technical standards for the safety-related aerodrome equipment, we need always to have in mind these essential requirements. Well, and this continues. So, for example, they need to have a suitable means of protection to avoid damage. The important thing is the information of the operation and the use of the equipment needs to be made available to relevant staff, including clear indications of the conditions which may create unacceptable risks to the aviation safety. So these are the essential requirements which we need to make sure that they are taken into consideration when we draft and propose the technical specifications. Now, the things which are more important for you, and these are the examples of some aerodrome equipment which may fall under the future regulation. And to that end, we have the visual aids, for example, the lights and the signs. We have the AVDGS, the Advanced Visual Docking Guidance System, the friction measurement devices, the FOD detection systems, or FOD radars. We can also have the avian radar, the runway weather information systems, which became very, very popular with the introduction of the GRF, the aircraft arresting systems. So these are some systems which we have in mind to include in the under this regulation. And of course, we have other things in mind, so the list is not yet fixed. Other equipment could be also stand allocation software. If you are using a tool to allocate stands at an airport, we know that sometimes it's very critical because you need to make sure that the system takes into consideration all the parameters at the airport and allocates the aircraft based on the size of the aircraft, the neighboring stands, all these things. Other things which are important are the firefighting foams, which is getting more and more important for us. Because many of you are aware that we are changing now from AFFF to fluorine-free foams, and there is a big discussion about these types of foams and their effectiveness. And of course, we need to also to be open to include other future equipment. We have seen lately that more and more innovative equipment is produced, and we need to find a way in the future to include them into our regulatory framework. Now, the structure of the regulatory framework. So we have the regulation, the 139, which will remain almost untouched. And in the middle, we are going to have, not in the middle, but this regulation will have a link with the regulation for the aerodrome equipment. And the regulation for the aerodrome equipment, where we will describe everything that is requested by the basic regulation. So there we will have the requirements for the agency, how the agency will certify or accept declarations, because also we have to operate under specific rules. We will describe how the certification of the equipment will be done, how EASA will oversee the equipment, what are the obligations of the manufacturers. So all these things will be included in this regulation, in the new regulation. Of course, every EASA regulation comes together with the AMC and the guidance material. And then we have already the certification specifications for aerodrome design. And in the future, we have also the CSs for aerodrome equipment. But there will be a link in certain cases between the CSs for aerodrome equipment and CSs for aerodrome design, because, for example, the visual aids, which currently are in CS ADR design, they need to have a link also with the equipment, because they will be subject to certification. Now, we need to look into the future, how the system will work. And I think this is very important, both from the aerodrome operator side and also from the manufacturer side. And in the current, in Regulation 139, there is always a responsibility of the aerodrome operator to demonstrate compliance with, for example, with the certification basis of the aerodrome. So they need to demonstrate that a certain type of equipment complies with the specifications established by the agency. So this demonstration of compliance will never change. It's a responsibility of the aerodrome operator. What is new now is that if you have an equipment where you need to demonstrate compliance, there are two options. The first option is if the equipment is certified by the agency, then, or is declared to the agency, then it's considered that it complies with the specifications and can be used. In some cases, you may need to have some site acceptance tests, but the certificate or the declaration demonstrates that the equipment complies with the certification specifications. So the aerodrome operator, while by using a certified equipment, does not have the burden to prove to the competent authority that the equipment is in accordance with the specifications. But of course, they can continue, well, they can use an equipment which is not certified. But in this case, the aerodrome operator is responsible to conduct all the tests to ensure, to demonstrate that the equipment complies with the certification specifications. So you understand that the new regulatory framework will bring one more option to the aerodrome operators. So instead of taking over the responsibility to demonstrate compliance, so this can be demonstrated by the use of equipment that has a certificate or it has been declared to the agency. So this is for the aerodrome operator. Now, if we're talking about the manufacturer of aerodrome equipment, well, the it's a similar case. First of all, we need to make clear that we do not oblige all the manufacturers to come to get a certificate. This is another option, and this will be described in the regulation. So if a manufacturer decides, for example, not to go for a certificate or declaration, then they have to go through the aerodrome operator, provide the equipment, conduct all the tests, and then you need to have all the documentation presented to the competent authority in order to get the approval. But this is for each and every airport. And this, you understand that this is a burden for both the aerodrome operator and for the equipment manufacturer. While if you go for a certificate or declaration, this is recognized throughout the EU. So by the time you get an EASA certificate, then you don't need to go, as a manufacturer, you don't need to go through all these certification tests and all the documentation, which is the biggest advantage of the manufacturers. And I have to say that this is not limited only to EU, let's say, manufacturers. This is for everybody around the world that they want to come to EU and they want to sell a product and they want to go for an EASA certificate or submit a declaration, depending on if the equipment is subject to certification or declaration, they can do it. But then there is also another option for the manufacturers. They have also the option to get a design and production organization approval, meaning that if you get a DPO, how we call it, such an approval by the agency, it gives some benefits and some advantages for the organization. First of all, the organization has to submit the documentation once. And when I'm telling about documentation, I'm telling about the management system of the organization, the structure of the organization, the quality management, the production procedures, the design procedures. All these things are submitted once. The benefit is that when you provide all this information and you get the approval by the agency, then you have some privileges, and the biggest privileges is to approve major and minor changes. Meaning that if you need to change something in the equipment, you don't have to come to the agency and say, well, I need to change this, and I require your approval. Because as an organization, you are approved and then you are overseen by the agency, you are given the privilege to approve minor changes and certain major changes, which is a big benefit, especially for organizations which they have a lot of products and they have very robust system. This might not be appropriate for small organizations where they are selling one product. But also, if they don't want to go into the DPO approval, then they have the option to go only for the certificate of the equipment. The problem for this one is that every time that you need to resubmit your quality management system, your processes, in order to prove that that you have the capabilities as an organization to produce to manufacture the equipment, and of course, then you need to follow to do all the tests in order to get the certificate of the equipment or to submit a declaration. And the burden here is that every change has to be approved by EASA. So whenever you have to change something, you have to come to EASA and ask the EASA to approve the change before you do anything, which is not the best for all organizations and for all cases. And I think this is also a process that I'm not 100% sure, but as far as I know, FAA, they have the same process, meaning that every change, for example, has to be approved by them before implementation. So that's a process for the aerodrome operator, and this is also the process for the manufacturer. Now, on the technical specifications, how we are going to develop the specifications. For those which are very familiar with our system for the CSs. And our intention is not to reinvent the wheel, because first of all, for quite a number of equipment, the specifications are already there. And well, it's going to be based on ICAO documentation where available. So Annex 14 and the related design manuals will be used as a source for the agency to develop the specifications. Another important thing is the use of industry standards. This is something that is becoming more and more popular. At least in Europe, we have EuroCAE, and I think some of you are aware of the work conducted in EuroCAE, for example, for the runway weather information systems, for the FODA detection systems. So we may use these industry standards. We can also use ISO, also ASTM. Sometimes we will be looking also on the other side of the Atlantic what FAA is doing. And we can also use the traditional process by the agency, with which some of you are aware. We develop the standards using a group of experts, and we draft together the technical specifications. But before everything goes into force, for example, the technical specifications, everything has to be reviewed and consulted before adoption. Even, for example, we say that for this type of equipment, we are going to use the ISO standard. This is also subject to consultation. Even a single reference to ISO standard, people, they may say, we don't like this ISO standard. So everything will be subject to consultation. The expected benefits now, well, we think that the administrative burden for aerodrome operators and the equipment manufacturers is going to be less on the long run, because at the beginning, of course, you have to align, you have to implement the system, you need to in order to comply with the regulation. At the beginning, there is an initial effort, but when everything is in place, then the administrative burden for both, it's going to be far less. And you think, for example, that the aerodrome operator, well, they can use a certificate and demonstrate to the competent authority that the equipment complies with certification, with the technical specifications. The equipment manufacturers, they have to prove once to the agency that the equipment complies, and then the certificate is recognized throughout EU, so there is no need for additional tests and further approvals. And this is what is in the second bullet point. The other thing is a level playing field, so everybody is playing with the same rules. And for the equipment manufacturers, it's one-stop shop, meaning that your point of contact is going to be EASA, and from there you will get all the information, you will get the certificates, you will submit the declarations, so you have only one point of contact in EU for your equipment. On the timelines, well, it's tentative because, well, you know, sometimes planning is changing. So this task is under rulemaking task 161 is subtask 4, and this rulemaking task talks about conformity assessment of ATM ANS systems and constituents. And by the way, the regulations have been published, I think on the 14th or 15th of, I think 14th of September for the ATM ANS systems and constituents. And it's a very good idea to go and check these regulations, because also for the safety related aerodrome equipment, the regulations are going to be similar, not exactly the same, but similar. So our plan is to publish the NPA by the end of this year, latest. Although we are working hard to make it even earlier. And we are working with a group of representatives from member states, airports, manufacturers, and we are discussing the proposal. And the draft regulation will be published, the EASA opinion will be published towards the end of Q2 2024. And following the adoption process, normally it's going to take around 1 year to publish the regulation. So we're expecting a regulation by Q2 2025. And our objective is by that time to publish also the AMC, the guidance material, and the specifications. But also these timelines are tentative and, well, might be shifted a little bit to the right. And of course, the regulation will foresee a transition period, as well as what we will do with the existing equipment. But the intention is not to turn the system upside down and create problems for existing equipment. We will need to find a solution to ensure the smooth transition from the current system to the future system and the continuous, let's say, functioning of existing equipment. And by saying that, I think that concludes my presentation. And I'm very happy to take questions.